It's true.
Hello. Today is Monday, November 3rd. Welcome to episode 522 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's Hello, today is Monday, November 3rd. Welcome to episode 522 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by founder and executive director Jamil Jaffer and senior fellows Morgan Vina and Andrew Boreen. Folks, we're going to stay on the topic of West Africa. On Friday, we talked about what was going on in the country of Mali. Today, we're going to talk about Nigeria. The reason we're talking about Nigeria is President Trump issued a social media post in the last couple of days basically saying the U.S. would go into Nigeria guns a-blazing, and I'm quoting here, guns a-blazing, to address the issue of violence against Christians in that country. There has been a long history of sectarian violence in Nigeria between Christians and Muslims. Tens of thousands have been killed on either side. There are terrorist groups in northern Nigeria, Boko Haram leaps to mind, that have been engaged in an active campaign against Christians in that country. It is something that has plagued Nigeria for years. Morgan, I want to go to you first here. I know you've been tracking this issue for a long time, going back to our days in the Senate together. What are your thoughts about what President Trump has said and what the U.S. should be doing about this apparent crisis in Nigeria?
Thanks, Les. Really appreciate the topic today. Again, sticking with Africa. Look, this topic we could talk for hours about this, and so instead we have literally like 10 minutes. Jamil would probably prefer 7, let's be honest. But so with that said, keep in mind that everything I'm about to say, we're talking about in more generalist terms here. And that is, first and foremost, we're basically talking about 2 different conflicts that are going on in Nigeria right now. And I think that the administration is teetering on conflating the 2. For years now, there are conservative Christian organizations within the United States that have claimed that Nigeria is experiencing a genocide against Christians. And I think we need to sort of clarify what that means or how they're perceiving it. And first and foremost, to clear the air, there is no genocide against Christians going on in Nigeria. First and foremost, this is an ethnic conflict driven by the Fulani herdsmen, the Muslim ethnic tribe, against Christian farmers and nomadic tribes within Nigeria's middle belt and towards the north. At the same time, there's a second conflict that we're seeing here, predominantly in northern Nigeria, which is a Muslim-dominated part of the country. And that is what you're seeing with Boko Haram and Islamic State, West Africa. And those crimes are actually being committed predominantly against Muslims. There is no state-sanctioned genocide that is taking place right now, despite the fact that Nigeria was put on the country of concern list on Friday. Nigeria is not on this par with China. It's not on par with North Korea, where you actually see Christians being murdered and imprisoned for expressions of their faith. I would also note that President Tinubu has actually stated that, he would welcome President Trump's security assistance. In addition to that, I'm sure he would also love a one-on-one meeting with the president. Keep in mind here that, the African diaspora population in the United States is actually very pro-Trump. So I do think there are a lot of different dynamics here that we need to take into consideration. This is not a sort of a black and white approach when it comes to conflicts in a West African state. These are very dynamic. They're constantly evolving. This crisis between conflict that has been going on between the Fulani and the Christian tribes has been going on for decades. Boko Haram, that conflict, that issue has been going on for about 15 years or so. We all remember Michelle Obama's Bring Back Our Girls campaign. And as Jamil will note, most of them did not come back. So with that said, I think the president needs to and his and his advisors, particularly in the State Department and in OSD policy at the Department of War, need to take a step back and understand the conflict a little bit more clearly before they take, or at least call for, military action.
Jamil Jaffer, Morgan is in one way talking about one of the oldest conflicts known to man, which is between nomadic groups and settled groups, different conceptions of who owns the land, how you exploit resources, how you feed your people, etc. Do we have an easy solution to this situation?
So listen, I mean, this is a problem that's plagued human civilization for thousands of years, going back to the early days of human civilization. You know, whether you organize in societies or organize, you know, in an agricultural society that moves around, and this is a problem that plagues the Middle East today. It's part of the Middle East situation today. It's part of what we see in Africa. It's part of what we see in East Asia as well. So this is not a problem unknown to the world. It's just a problem we've never effectively solved. But I will say I am heartened by seeing President Trump get more actively engaged on issues of counterterrorism. He's been dramatically more engaged in this term than he was in his first term in the Western Hemisphere in terms of taking actual action against groups, whether you view them as international criminals and drug dealers or terrorist groups as the Trump administration has. He's on the offensive. And now he's talking about going on the offensive in Nigeria. He might, to Morgan's point, be getting the specific reasons a little wrong or a little confused between the fight against terrorism and the issues with Christians and Muslims in the herder-farmer belt. But the fact of the matter is that it's important for America to lead and lean forward. For the better part of a decade now, since 2015, we've really taken our eye off the counterterrorism ball. We've not done an effective job. We now see, as you guys discussed on Friday, we've seen the rise of al-Qaeda in Mali. We've seen an actual terrorist leader from the al-Nusra Front come to power in Syria. We're all feting him and celebrating the change of government in Syria, which, to be sure, Bashar al-Assad was brutal. But having an al-Qaeda leader come to power is not a win for anybody. We're seeing this around the globe. So I'm glad President Trump is engaged on Nigeria. You know, he once famously said, who knows where Lesotho is? Well, he clearly has figured out where Nigeria is. That's a good thing. And the more we pay attention to what's happening in Africa, in East and Central Asia, and in the Middle East on the counterterrorism front, the more likely we are to be safe and more secure here at home.
Andrew, do you also welcome President Trump's guns a-blazing approach to Nigeria?
Well, look, I think that you can see a pattern every time this administration enters into foreign conflict or talks about exerting the president's kind of unique counterterrorism authorities that have been established very long term through more than 20 years since 9/11 and the authorization for the use of military force. And so I think we do frequently see a pattern where there might be indelicate statements that emerge on social media. But the underlying points that Jamil just made, I completely agree with. I do see a pattern of at least a decade of the United States taking resources off of the field in the realm of counterterrorism. And particularly if you look at the continent of Africa, West Africa is in a very tenuous position when you talk about America being, frankly, having the capacity to exert counterterrorism missions. Right now, Niger would be a logical point to stage anti-Boko Haram. And let's not forget the Islamic State in West Africa. These are groups that not only kill Christians, they kill Muslims who they deem to be apostate. They kill non-religious minorities. They kill people, period, regardless of their faith-based beliefs. And in many ways, I think there are many historical precedents where there is insufferable, intolerable violence against innocent humans perpetuated by terrorist groups. And Northern Ireland comes to mind. How many of us didn't understand that Northern Ireland was not a religious conflict? It was an ethnic conflict with overlays related to governance and overlays related to 400 years of history. Nigeria is not different. And I really appreciated, Morgan, your discussion on the fact that there are multiple layers to the conflict and the violence. Yes, there are multiple layers to the conflict and the violence, but the violence is intolerable. The targeting of innocent civilians, Muslims, non-Muslims, Christians alike, needs to be addressed. And so I think that, like many things with the way this administration seems to operate, there are very, very aggressive statements that fit into 240 characters or less. Then probably I can safely assume that many people throughout the interagency have looked at this issue and they've looked at what are the strike options. Those strike options probably include things that would fall under the authorization for the use of military force against violent extremists or terrorists. Secondly, it probably doesn't involve landing a bunch of C-130s or troop-carrying aircraft into Nigeria. It probably more likely looks like partner-enabled missions with the Nigerian government. Probably looks more like partner-enabled missions with African partner countries. Or it could look like long-range strike, precision strike, kind of the old model of counterterrorism. There's a very large U.S. presence in Djibouti in the Horn of Africa. That's far away from Niger and far away from Nigeria. But I think that it's very difficult to say, hey, a 240 character statement is the summation of American policy on this issue. And there are important legal things that are going to come up. Security sector assistance, Leahy Act, right? How will the United States execute a campaign against Boko Haram, against the Islamic State, and potentially against some of these other groups that are perpetuating violence against humans? So I think I like to look at this at the much bigger issue. Values-wise, would it be a good thing if the United States had a stronger counterterrorism presence on the continent of Africa? And I can say definitively, this analyst thinks that that is 100% a good thing. We have vacated the field in Africa. We've left it open to Russian influence. We've left it open to Chinese economic exploitation. And if this is a hook that starts to say America needs to ramp up some presence and some capabilities on that continent to protect innocent civilians, I am all for it. And there are many legal mechanisms that suggest that targeting Boko Haram and the Islamic State is probably the first and easiest legal authorities bucket with which to start exerting American influence for the better of humanity on the continent. But that's just my opinion.
All right. Good stuff. I'm going to go full kumbaya here and say, before we get to some sort of strike package against terrorists that are running around an enormous area in the Sahel and the Sahara, which will be virtually impossible to execute even by the best of the best. We need a soft power approach that makes sense. This administration has dismantled all of our tools in that regard, or many of them. There's no replacement scheme involved to address these issues. Much better to do this stuff through aid programs and other things rather than having the U.S. military get directly involved. And I wish this administration would take some of those tools seriously. There did have to be changes. You didn't have to destroy the entire system to get there. Yes, we need a commitment to Yes, we need a commitment to counterterrorism, but we also need a sensible approach on soft power issues, because a lot of these things are endemic to the region, and we can address them through smart economic assistance and that kind of thing. Jamil, I'll give you one final word, Mr. Founder.
I think nobody doubts that soft power is important. Well, maybe the administration doubts it, but I think everyone on this podcast agrees soft power is important. But it only works less if it's backed by hard power. And so we should celebrate President Trump's willingness to exert hard power. It's not popular amongst his base. He's willing to do it. We need to get more aggressive, not less, against terrorist groups around the globe. To Andrew's point, he made the point about Africa. It is true around the globe. We have let our counterterrorism footprint decay dramatically around the globe. That is a mistake. That makes Americans more vulnerable here at home. President Trump, I think, might be on the verge of recognizing that. If so, that's a win for everybody. It's a win for America and a win for our allies.
I will take that as an endorsement of a new revamped U.S. foreign assistance program. That's a wrap. Thanks always to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for the help in producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, November 5th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. We're on YouTube. Check out our channel there for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.